I'm Channing Mavrellis. I am a guidance and outreach advisor with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. We are a bureau within the Department of the Treasury, and we are tasked with leading these efforts in terms of implementing the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. This is a new requirement, and so I'm here to give you some information about it and really to ease your anxiety about how to comply. So today I'm going to take you through a slide deck. I'm going to talk about kind of the nitty gritty of who needs to report, what you need to report, when you need to report this and how you do so, how you update or correct any information. And I think maybe something on some people's mind is how are we handling enforcement? I'll go through this slide deck. I'm going to show you quickly our website and how to file, and then the rest of the time will be open for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to kick things off. Perfect. Okay. So the Corporate Transparency Act. The United States has the largest financial system in the world. And unfortunately, with that, you have criminals using our financial system to launder enormous sums of money. And what they've been doing is using anonymous companies, using companies where you don't know the ultimate owner of the company to do so. This is one of the a popular way of laundering funds and engaging in illicit activity is to use an anonymous company. So anonymous companies, they destabilize our economies, they harm fair competition among law-abiding small businesses, and they obviously facilitate further crime and illicit finance. So what the CTA does is it requires many companies that do business in the US to report their beneficial ownership information to FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Excuse me. And so with that, the beneficial ownership information, it's kind of a fancy way of saying those people who ultimately own or control the company. So the beneficial ownership reporting resources. I'm going to talk about this, and I'm mentioning it a lot of times throughout this presentation, but we have a ton of resources at fincen.gov/BOI. Effective January 1st of this year, many companies in the US have to begin reporting this information to us. So it's a very quick process. It takes about 20 minutes. And we find that for most companies that have kind of small or medium-sized businesses that have relatively simple ownership structures, like I said, it takes about 20 minutes. If you file directly with us, it is free. There's no cost to file with FinCEN. And it's not an annual requirement. So you're going to file your beneficial ownership information with FinCEN. If any of that information changes, and I'll go into this a little bit more in depth, you will need to update this, but you don't need to file a report annually automatically. It's a one-time unless any of the information changes. I also want to emphasize that this is not a public database. Someone cannot request this information through a Freedom of Information Act. This is not discoverable during a lawsuit. FinCEN will only share this information with authorized recipients for the specified intent of supporting federal, state, and local law enforcement, defending U.S. national security interests, and safeguarding the integrity of our economic system. So this information is protected and it's not publicly available. Now, if you go to our website, which I will show you, the Small Entity Compliance Guide is a great tool to have if you have any questions about this once this is over, as well as while you're filing your report. But it goes through, again, what I'm going to cover in this presentation. Who has to report? Who's a beneficial owner? Who's a company applicant? And do I have to report that? What information do I need to report about my company and about the individuals who own and control it? When and how should my company file? And what if there are changes or inaccuracies to the information that I reported? I'm going to talk about it today, and this is all covered in the report, the Small Entity Compliance Guide. Okay, so I think the basic question is, does my company have to report its beneficial owners? So when we talk about companies that have to report, we call them a reporting company. So you have domestic reporting companies and foreign reporting companies. I'm going to focus on domestic reporting companies, but I'll just touch on foreign companies as well. So a domestic reporting company, and this is kind of your baseline for anybody who has to report, is a corporation, a limited liability company, or any other entity that was created by filing a document with a Secretary of State or similar office. A foreign reporting company is the same thing, a corporation, an LLC, or any other entity formed under the laws of a foreign country that has registered to do business in the United States by filing a document with a Secretary of State or similar office. So again, that bottom line is for domestic companies, have you filed a document with a Secretary of State to be created? Now, I want to emphasize that a lot of times, like sole proprietorships and certain trusts, they generally are not reporting companies. If you file a document just to register that you have a business, if you file a document with a Secretary of State to get a trade name or a DBA, a doing business as, to register a name, if you file a document with a governmental authority to obtain an EIN, if you file a document with a governmental authority to get a professional or occupational license, those do not count as being created. So therefore, if that's all you've done, you are not a reporting company because you were not created by filing a document with a Secretary of State or similar office. Now, we do have some exemptions. There's 23 exemptions, and I recommend if you have any questions about those to go to our small entity compliance guide. It gives a really great step-by-step criteria for all of the different exemptions and helps you determine if you may be eligible. But our exempt companies include things like banks, credit unions, tax-exempt entities, public utilities, and certain large companies. Again, the small entity compliance guide includes a full list of these exemptions. So you've determined that you are a reporting company and you need to report your information to FinCEN. So you then need to determine who is a beneficial owner of your company. So a beneficial owner is any individual who directly or indirectly owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interests of a reporting company or exercises substantial control over a reporting company. So there's two prongs, two ways a person could qualify. You could qualify, for example, if you own 30% of a company, or if you make important decisions. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about substantial control on the next slide. Right now, I'm going to focus on ownership interests. But an individual could be a beneficial owner through substantial control, through ownership interests, or both. There may be circumstances where nobody owns more than 25% of the ownership interests. So for example, you have 5 people who own equally the ownership interests. They each own 20%. Those individuals would not be reported or would not be considered beneficial owners through ownership interests. However, they may be considered beneficial owners because of substantial control. And again, I'll touch on that for a second. In a second, excuse me. Ownership interests, it's anybody who has the 25% control or more. It includes things like equity, stock, profit interest, convertible instruments. There's a whole checklist of different ways somebody could have or own or control ownership interests if you check in our small entity compliance guide. I will flag there are 5 exceptions to the definition of a beneficial owner. One includes a minor child. In this instance, you can report the information about the minor child in terms of like their name, date of birth, things like that. Or you have the option to report the information of a parent or guardian until that minor child becomes 18. Anybody who acts as a nominee, intermediary, custodian, or an agent would not be considered a beneficial owner. An employee of a company would not be considered a beneficial owner. However, I recommend the small entity compliance guide. We'll talk about this a little bit more. An inheritor, so you are not considered a beneficial owner until you actually inherit this, and a creditor. Now, going on to touch about substantial control. We've talked about ownership interests if you own or control 25% or more of the company. Substantial control, excuse me, are individuals who meet any of the following criteria. So the individual is a senior officer of the company. So for example, they're a president, they're a CEO, they are a CFO, they are the general counsel for that company. If an individual has the authority to appoint or remove certain officers or a majority of directors of the reporting company, so they have the authority, for example, to remove the president of the company. The individual is an important decision maker. So important decisions, I recommend checking our small entity compliance guide and our FAQs as well, but it's decisions about a reporting company's business, finances, and structure. So things like they have the ability to change the company from an LLC to a corporation. They have the ability to buy or sell assets of the company. They have the ability to enter into contracts, get a mortgage, get a loan, different things like that. Or if the individual has any other form of substantial control over the reporting company. We know there's a lot of different ways to exert control over a company, and some might be a little bit unique. So we've left this open for different circumstances that might fit, one company here or there. But again, if you have any questions, check our small entity compliance guide. Okay, so the other group of individuals we're going to talk about are company applicants. Now, I'll first flag that if your company was created before January 1st, 2024, you do not need to report your company applicants. So again, if you were created before the first of this year, you don't need to report company applicants. If your company was created on January 1st, 2024 or later, so going forward, you do need to report your company applicants. Company applicants, quite simplistically, are those individuals who help create the company in terms of filing documents with the Secretary of State or similar office. And it can be up to 2 individuals. It's the individual who directly filed the documents that created or first registered a domestic or foreign reporting company, or it can be the individual who is primarily responsible for directing or controlling the filing of the creation or first registration document. For example, you're a business owner, you yourself took those documents to the Secretary of State and filed them. You are the company applicant. That's what you need to report your information there. If you, for example, engaged a CPA to do so, you would be the individual who is primarily responsible for directing or controlling the filing. And the CPA would be the individual who directly filed the document that created or first registered a domestic or foreign company. We have a few other examples in our small entity compliance guide that can be very helpful if you have questions about this. Okay, so what specific information do you need about my company? So this is the information you want to have on hand with you before you file a beneficial ownership information report. You need the full legal name of the company. If you have any trade names or doing business as DBA names that you use with that company, your complete U.S. address. This needs to be the street address where you primarily conduct your business. It cannot be a P.O. box. Your jurisdiction of formation. My guess is for many of you, it will be Texas. So where were you created or formed? And a taxpayer identification number. It's going to depend on how your business is organized, but we do accept EINs, Social Security numbers, and ITINs. It just depends on the type of business that you have. So that's what you need for your company. For any beneficial owner or company applicant, if you do need to report a company applicant, remember some companies don't, you need to report their full legal name, their date of birth, their residential address, and then you need an identifying number and issuing jurisdiction from one of 4 acceptable identification documents. We accept a non-expired driver's license, a non-expired U.S. passport, or a non-expired identification document issued by a state, local government, or Indian tribe. If an individual does not have any of those 3 items or 3 documents, they are allowed to use a foreign passport, a non-expired foreign passport. However, it must be only if they don't have those first 3 items. So we'll need the identification number. For example, if you have a driver's license, you would put in your driver's license number. You would say it's been issued by Texas. And then for each of these, we need an image of the document. It can be black and white. It can be in color. You just need generally the front of the image, the front of the ID, whatever has that information on there. So whatever side of the ID has the identification number and issuing jurisdiction, we need an image of that. It just needs to be clear and legible. So one option that both individuals and companies have is something called a FinCEN identifier. It's completely optional, but what it is, it's a unique identifying number that FinCEN will issue to an individual or reporting company once they provide that required information to us. So you can only receive one identifier. And what you can do with that is, instead of reporting all of those different details to us in the beneficial ownership information report, you can provide it to us via your FinCEN identifier application. And then on your BOI report, your beneficial ownership information report, you will just provide your FinCEN identifier. For example, we find that if you have maybe 4 people who own a company and one individual does not want to provide a copy of their driver's license to the company, if they don't want to provide different things in terms of maybe their residential address, if they don't feel comfortable doing so, their option is they provide that information directly to FinCEN, and then FinCEN will provide them with a FinCEN identifier. And then that individual provides the FinCEN identifier to the reporting company, which reports it. Again, this is optional, so don't feel obligated to get it, but I will show you when I walk you through the website what this looks like. Okay, so when and how do you report? So if your company existed before January 1st, 2024, you have until January 1st, 2025 to file your initial report. If your company was created in 2024, so if you were created between January 1st, 2024 and January 1st, 2025, you have 90 calendar days from the date of actual or public notice. So actual notice would be something like you submit your documents to the Secretary of State and they send you an email, they send you a letter, and they directly tell you that your company is now active. It's now created within the state. That's actual notice. So from that date that you receive that confirmation. The other is public notice. Some states may not provide kind of direct or actual notice. What they may do is, once a company is active in the state, they will put the name of the company on a public database. So from the date that your company's name appears on that database, that is considered you have 90 days from that date. Now, January 1st, 2025 and going forward, you have 30 calendar days after receiving actual or public notice to file your initial report. And how do you do so? You do it online at fincen.gov/BOI. That's the only way you can file. You have the option of either doing it by a PDF, you download and then upload once you've completed it, or what we find most people do is they use our online form. Okay, so what if there are changes or inaccuracies in the reported information? So if any of the information that you've reported to us changes, so anything about the company in terms of if you move to a different location, if you, for example, if you are an LLC and you become a corporation, and so your company was First Value Hardware LLC and you're now First Value Hardware Corporation, you would need to update that information with us. Or if anything about a beneficial owner changes. So for example, if they have a name change, if they move to a different address, they would need to update that information with FinCEN. So you have 30 calendar days after the change occurs to file an updated report, and I'll show you how to do that. This is very similar to inaccuracies. If you discover an inaccuracy in your report, for example, if you live on 1 Main Street and you put 1 Main Avenue, once you realize your mistake, you have 30 calendar days to correct that information once you realize the inaccuracy. And it's very similar about how do you update the report. Okay, what happens if my company does not report its BOI in the required time frame? FinCEN is working very hard to ensure that reporting companies are aware of their obligations to report, update, and correct information. We understand it's a new reporting requirement, and that if you correct a mistake or omission within 90 calendar days after the deadline for the original report, you may avoid being penalized. However, there are civil and criminal penalties for willful violations of this law. And I want to emphasize willful violations. Our enforcement efforts are focused on willful violations. I'm going to repeat this a lot. So if you willfully choose not to file a beneficial ownership information report when you are required to do so, if you willfully provide false information, If you willfully prevent somebody else from filing a beneficial ownership information report, for example, by refusing to provide them with information. If you are, for example, a beneficial owner of a company and you refuse to provide your information to the reporting company, that's considered a willful violation. We don't want companies that are making a good faith effort to comply with this regulation to lose sleep over this. Again, we understand this is a new regulation. People are learning about it. People are trying their best to comply. This is not a gotcha exercise. We're not looking to just catch anybody who makes a mistake. We are, again, focused on willful violations of the law. And FinCEN.gov/BOI, it's probably the 50th time I've said it, but it's a great resource for you. And actually, I'm going to take you there right now. So give me 1 second to switch out. Oops, wrong mouse. Okay, here's our website, FinCEN.gov/BOI. So you have the prepare side. How do I file? Do I qualify? How do I get a FinCEN ID? And the file side. I'm going to put a pin in the file side for a moment, and I'm going to focus right here. We have issued 5 notices that provide filing relief for reporting companies, certain reporting companies that have been affected by recent natural disasters. If you think this may apply to you, please check all of the different notices here. Unfortunately, fraudsters are always very active. And so we are aware of fraudulent attempts to either solicit information or payments from reporting companies or individuals or companies that might be required to report. We provide some examples of what we've seen. Please be very careful if you receive any requests for payments. Like I said, there's no fee to file directly with FinCEN. You are able or definitely certainly can work with a third-party service provider if you need guidance or you want assistance with filing. Generally, that comes with a cost. However, there is no fee to file directly with FinCEN. If they ask you to click on a suspicious URL or QR code, if you receive any contact about penalties, we don't send initial correspondence regarding CTA penalties via email over the phone. So please, give it a good sniff test if you get something. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us right here at the contact center. You're going to go to FinCEN.gov/contact. The only way to contact us is through this contact form. So you're going to submit all of your information. You're going to say you have a question about beneficial ownership. What's the subject of your request, and then put your question in here. I swear to God, it goes to a real person. We try to take the time to answer your question with certain responses. If you have quite a unique question that requires a little bit of deliberation and due diligence, that comes to me and my colleagues at FinCEN, and we take the time to give you the correct response. So it's going to a real person, I swear. Now, back to here, I'm going to show you the small business resources really quick. That small entity compliance guide that I talked about for about 30 different times, you will find right here. We have our frequently asked questions here. We update those frequently. A lot of these are generated from questions that we get at webinars like this, when we meet people at small business expos, if there's certain trends and inquiries that we're receiving through our contact center. So we try to update those all the time. There's a short introductory video here, as well as on the front page, that can walk you through how to file. It's about a 5-minute video right here as well. And then here, if you want to file, if you want to create a FinCEN ID, again, that's optional. You'll click on the link right here. You do need to have a login.gov account to do this, and each FinCEN ID is specific to a login.gov account. What I'm going to show you now is how to file a BOI report. So you're going to go to the BOI e-filing system, and you're going to click here, Get Started. I want to file a BOI report. Like I mentioned earlier, you have the option to either file a PDF. So you would download the PDF, complete it, and then you would upload it, you'd submit it. Or what we find most people do is they'll complete it online. So we've clicked that. We're going to agree. And then this is what the report looks like. So for a lot of you people here, you're going to click an initial report. But if you need to correct a prior report, if you need to update a prior report, so, in here, there's a lot of pop-ups. There's a lot of additional information if you have questions that are right there available for you. So again, if you need to update a prior report, for example, if you are the sole business owner and you add your spouse as a 50% owner, you would need to update your beneficial ownership report to include that information about the new beneficial owner. But here we're going to file our initial report. Date prepared is auto-filled. It's today. We're going to click next. Now, if you want to receive a FinCEN identifier for your reporting company, this is how you would do it. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are wanting it for an individual, you'll do that back on that front page. You're going to put in your company's full legal name. If you have any alternate names, so trade names or DBAs, you'd put one here. And you'd add, if you have additional ones, you would add alternate name for each additional DBA. You're going to put in your tax identification number. So you're going to tell us what type it is. You're going to put in your tax identification number and the jurisdiction, but only if you're a foreign tax ID. You don't need to worry about that. Your jurisdiction of formation or first registration. So for example, let's just say you were formed in Texas. That's all you need to do. And then you need to put in your street address. So it needs to be the principal place of business of the company. Now, I understand in a post-COVID world, a lot of people might operate their business from home. That's totally fine. You just give us your residential home address if that's the principal place you're doing business. If there are other circumstances, for example, if you don't work from home, if you don't have a physical location, there are some options for you. I recommend checking our frequently asked questions page. But for now, you need your principal place of business, the street address, no PO boxes. Oops. Okay, standard information. Once you complete that, you'll click next, which will take you to a company applicant page. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if your company existed before January 1st, 2024, you do not need to report your company applicant information. So you would just click this box. If you do need to report company applicant information, this is where you would do it. Now, these fields are all the same as a beneficial owner, so I'm just going to show you through the beneficial owner that information you need to report. So here's what I mentioned earlier about a FinCEN ID. If you have a beneficial owner who chooses to obtain a FinCEN ID, they would have provided all of this below information directly to FinCEN, and they would then receive from FinCEN a FinCEN identifier or FinCEN ID. What they then would do would be provide you, if you're filling this form out for the reporting company, they would provide you with their FinCEN ID, and you would enter it here. And then you would not need to put any more information on this page for that individual. All you need to do is provide their FinCEN identification number. If they don't have a FinCEN identifier, you would just provide all of the following information. So their last and first name, date of birth, their residential address, basic information, and then again, what type of document do they have in the identification number. So let's say they're using a Texas driver's license. You're going to put your document number in here. Country or jurisdiction, it's going to be issued from the US. And you would say it's from Texas. And then here you would just choose to upload, you can either upload or drag the image. Generally, it's just going to be the front page, or the front side of your driver's license. But you would upload it here, and that's all you need for each beneficial owner. If you have another beneficial owner, you would just click this tab, and you would put in beneficial owner 2's information here. You don't need to tell us how they're a beneficial owner. You just need to report the beneficial owners. Once you do so, and you've completed all the information about your reporting company, your beneficial owner, and if applicable, your company applicant, you'll come here. You're going to put in your email address. This is important because this is where you will receive an email confirming or letting you know if your filing was successful or not. Your first and your last name, and then you're going to certify that the information in the report is true, correct, and complete. Now, once you do that, you're going to say you're a human and you're going to submit your BOIR, your Beneficial Ownership Information Report. What's going to happen is you're going to get a pop-up on your screen and it's going to tell you whether or not you've been successful. You also have, and this is the only opportunity, to download your Beneficial Ownership Information Report transcript. So you get a copy of the BOI report, and that's the only opportunity you have to download it. So don't click out, take a minute, download it, save it somewhere safe. And then at that point, if you did not file successfully, it will tell you what's wrong, what's missing. And then again, you're going to get an email confirmation or an alert letting you know, for example, if you were missing a piece of information, if something happened. So with that said, I'm going to stop the share and I am happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Channing, we do have some questions in the Q&A, and for anybody that is on, please use the Q&A feature and we'll get your questions answered. So one of the first questions is there a way to check compliance once filed?
So in terms of if you successfully filed, what you can do is if you go and you try to file a report again, if you put in the exact same name and exact same TIN and file it again, it'll tell you if a report has already been filed for that company. Okay. In terms of verification, like on our side, it's the obligation of the reporting company to ensure that their information has been reported and reported correctly to us. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. We have another one that wants to expand. There's a two-part question. It's on HOAs.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, do HOAs have to file? And secondly, they want to know how it works for their board members if the HOA was in place before 2024.
Sure. So HOAs, it's a maybe in terms of if they have to file. It all depends. And this is for any HOA, any condo board, any community association, any of those kind of types of entities along those lines. It's all going to depend on how you were created. Some were created by filing a document with the Secretary of State. Okay. And if so, you are a reporting company. However, there might be some that are tax exempt entities that may qualify for our tax exempt entity exemption. And I can see there's a question about this nonprofit organization. So I'll show you guys this in a second. I'll share this information with you. So it just depends on how you were created. And if you were kind of done in a formal way in terms of filing a document with the Secretary of State, or if you more just registered that your association exists, that wouldn't qualify as a reporting company. You have to be created. Or if you did go and pursue like a 501c3 or similar status, I will show you very quickly in our small business resources, in our small entity compliance guide, what this looks like. There. So we have our small entity compliance guide. And it has about 12 different languages. And once this decides to load. But what's great about the small entity compliance guide is it gives you a step-by-step check for each exemption and helps you know whether or not you qualify. If you do have questions, we can't tell you specifically if you write in with like a specific situation for yourself. We can't tell you whether or not you would or would not qualify. Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to show you guys. So you can see here, it has for each exemption, it shows you the criteria for them. So let's see if we can get down. Taking ages to load, my poor old computer. Public utility. Here's the tax exempt entity exemption. So if any of the following criteria, so if you meet any of these 4 criteria, you would qualify for the tax exempt entity exemption. So that's one possible way that a tax exempt entity or a nonprofit entity could qualify from an exemption to reporting. And that's possibly one way that a homeowners association, if they are a tax exempt entity that way, could also qualify. I recommend if you go to our frequently asked questions to section C on reporting companies, there's actually one specifically question on HOAs. When it comes to the board of directors, so you're going to report to us. So let's say your HOA existed before January 1st, 2024. What you need to report to us is who are the beneficial owners at that point in time that you file. So you need to report to us at that current time who are the beneficial owners, not who it was before January 1st. So if you decided to file today your BOI report, you're going to tell me who owns or controls, substantially controls your that HOA. And this could be an example where maybe a board member doesn't want to provide some information directly to the HOA. They can opt to obtain a FinCEN identifier and then provide that FinCEN identifier to the reporting company, to the HOA, to include in their report on their behalf.
Perfect. So another question that we have, it's another two-part question. Do the BOA reporting requirements apply to S corporations? And then also, if a business is not an LLC but a DBA, does that business need to file?
Okay, so to S corporations, it's going to come right down to, you're going to hear me say this over and over again. Did you file a document with the Secretary of State to be created? If you did, then you are a reporting company. And if you did not, then you are not a reporting company. So this kind of gets down to DBAs too. If you are, for example, a sole proprietor, so you did not form an LLC or any type of entity, if all you did was file a document with the Secretary of State or a similar government agency to register a DBA or register a trade name, that does not count as being created. So if that's all you've done, then you are not a reporting company. We do have a specific question about S Corps on our FAQ page though. So if you want that specific, you want a little bit more detail, but it's going to come down to, did you file a document with the Secretary of State to be created?
Perfect. And then another question is, does this new law apply to independent contractors?
So again, I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. It just depends. You know, if you are John Smith and you are operating as John Smith Construction, if you've only filed a document to register John Smith Construction with the Secretary of State, with your local council, with whomever to report that name, if that's all you've done in terms of your business, then you are not a reporting company. However, if you filed a document with the Secretary of State to become an LLC, to become John Smith Construction, LLC, then yes, you are a reporting company unless you qualify for an exemption. In terms of independent contractor or not, it just depends on how you were created or if you were created at all. So that's the kind of the bottom line is, if you didn't file a document to be created, then you're not a reporting company.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Here's another question. If an LLC company has two owners, one's at 49%, the other's at 51%, is one of them the beneficial owner, or does the 51% owner need to file?
Both of them. So again, anybody who owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interest. This is a great example. It doesn't matter if somebody owns 49 and 51, as long as it's over 25%. So if we go back to the report I just walked you through, you'd put in your reporting company information. I'm going to assume that you were created before January 1st of this year, so you're going to skip company applicant. And then for each beneficial owner, you're going to report the required information. And I showed you how to click up on the top, add beneficial owner. So for each beneficial owner, you're going to put in that information. You don't need to tell us, I own 49 and I own 51. If you qualify as a beneficial owner, your information needs to get added there.
And we have a great question here. What is the ultimate goal of having this in place that it hasn't been done in the past? So what are we hoping to achieve?
So we're hoping to have a centralized database that assists law enforcement, that assists regulators in terms of, this could be either like federal agencies, it could be state, local, and tribal law enforcement. We do allow access to foreign governments, but they have to make a request through a US agency, so for example, the Department of Justice, Department of State, that request has to be approved. For all of those, the purpose needs to be either for law enforcement, for national security, or for intelligence purposes. Okay. This information is also available to financial institutions with the consent of their customer. And then any financial institution or regulator, just to make sure that the financial institution is meeting its obligations. The Treasury Department has access to this information. So the challenge that's been there before is either this information, the beneficial ownership information, is just not collected when a company is created. Many states don't ask for the name of the beneficial owner. They just want a registered agent. They just want a primary person to contact. So they may not have any details about who ultimately owns or controls the company. Or if they do collect that information stays within the state. That information is not shared anywhere. And so the goal is to have a centralized database so that it can make it a lot easier for, let's say like law enforcement to get to the heart of any kind of civil or criminal issue. A lot of times when you have anonymous companies, the anonymity allows the criminal to avoid accountability. So for law enforcement, when speaking with them, it can take them a significant amount of time and resources. If they're seeing that money is being laundered by company A, but company A is owned by company B, and company B is owned by company C, how do they determine who's really behind there? Who's pulling the strings? So this helps us kind of just push through all that opacity and know who's really ultimately in control, and can be very helpful for law enforcement for both civil and criminal cases as well. And I think it also can be really helpful. We've heard from people from small businesses who apply for either minority-owned businesses, disadvantaged business grants, and they've complained that some of the grants have been awarded to people who may not be minority owners. They may not be a disadvantaged business. And so the ability for, let's say, a small business administration, for the Treasury Department to actually see who ultimately owns or controls a company can help them verify that they are providing a grant that's, destined, that's intended to go to a minority owner, that's intended to go to a disadvantaged business owner, that they're actually going to the right person and not somebody who's just saying that they are.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great note to wrap up on. This has been so helpful. We'll be sharing this also with our small businesses in our community. And we thank you so much, Channing, for your time. What a wealth of information. We've also put the link to the website in the chat feature, and we'll share that out with our attendees as well. We just can't thank you enough. This is a big topic, and you tackled it quite well.